To talk poverty and the power of politics, we have with us one campaign chairman, Tom Freston. We're going to start out by giving you a sense of who Tom Freston is, because probably most of you are not that familiar with Tom and his career. So I want to start out, Tom, by asking you, what were you doing in 1970 when the LBJ school opened its doors?
Well, in 1970, I was basically living in an alienated state in New York City. Nixon was president, the Vietnam War was going full blast, and I was very much caught up with all the angst of the 60s. I had finished college and graduate school, and I had a job working at an ad agency in New York on, believe it or not, the G.I. Joe account. Now, as an anti-war person, this only added to my alienation. It was supposed to be the beginning of a career track for me, but I felt constricted there, and there was something else I wanted to do, but I didn't know really what it was. I didn't know it then, but I had pretty limited perspective. I hadn't really traveled anywhere and had no idea what a role international travel and perspective would play later on in my life.
So what did you do?
What did I do? Well, I quit. That's what I up and quit. It was like, take this job and shove it. I bought a one-year round trip ticket on Icelandic Airlines for $165 and headed off with $6,000 to see the world at last. I mean, I'd only been to school and more school and work. And I was really just, at that point, just looking for adventure. I mean, I didn't really have an agenda. I went across the Sahara. I hitchhiked all over Africa and Europe, settled in places for weeks at a time like Berlin or Greece. And the big thing though is I headed to India from Istanbul. And that trip really transformed my life and what I thought I could do with it. Built up my confidence, my sense of empathy, my sense of geography, obviously, and my personal network. I realized I could go anywhere and do anything after that. And I fell in love with both India and Afghanistan, decided I want to live there. I started a business there. It was successful, and I stayed for 8 years.
And you saw the sort of extreme poverty that you're dealing with now at the One campaign.
That was really my eye-opening revelation, was witnessing the reality and justice of extreme poverty up real close. And in those days, it was really extreme. We're talking about the early 70s. So famines, plagues, lepers on the street, you name it. It opened my heart, and it's something that never left me. So while it was sort of an adventure trip at the beginning, the trip and then my years in Asia really changed my outlook on life for good.
So why didn't you just stay in India and Afghanistan?
Well, I would have loved to, but in 79 and 78, there was a communist coup in Afghanistan. That was bad. I had to close that down. Then there was all these trade issues with the United States and India. So I came away 8 years later, deep in debt, my tail between my legs, looking to change careers. And, music was my other passion in life. And I was able to wrangle an interview with a man who actually appreciated my entrepreneurial talents. And I joined a team of 5 or 6 people to develop and launch the idea of a channel that would become MTV. Now, this was early 80s, the dawn of the cable TV era. So you often think about the role luck can play in your career and timing. I mean, I hit it sort of perfectly, and it became just the most wonderful ride. And I stayed for 26 years.
So for those of you who don't know, Tom Freston, and there's a team of sort of famous people in media who went on to other big gigs in media who built MTV. But I will declare Tom Freston as the father of MTV. And Tom, the reason that we think you're particularly relevant for this LBJ forum, one of many reasons, is that you brilliantly used that platform to impact policy. And I'm curious whether with Rock the Vote and Choose or Lose and other programs, Live Aid, when you started building MTV, did you see it as a platform to change the world, or did that come later?
No, we just want to get on the air, and it was strictly an entertainment option when we started it. But we soon came to realize we built what today people would say was a large, engaging platform. And we figured, we could do good things on that platform. And if we did that, it would be good for our business. It would give us more dimension, more credibility. We'd be more important in the culture. So we were a driver in the Live Aid concert back in 1985. And we set up, after that, I set up a whole sort of pro-social department. And we went on to run programs, starting simple ones like drunk driving and drug use. And we got into political activism in the late 80s. As a founder of Rock the Vote, which was to engage young people to register to vote. And in the 92 election with Bush the first versus Clinton, we decided we launched Choose or Lose, which became very consequential. We wanted to raise the amount of young people who would vote. And that had been, sort of low. We were actually at the end of that by engaging the candidates and have them talk to young people about issues they cared about. They weren't caring about Social Security. We were able to raise the voting levels for 18 to 24-year-olds, by 25%.
Wow.
And it sort of went on from there, but we were always very conscious of, and I used to bonus people. It was part of their, compensation packages, what kind of social platform usage we could do in any given year.
So Tom went on to become CEO of Viacom, the parent company of MTV and Nickelodeon and a lot of other large media cable channels. Tom got fired. Tom got fired in 2006, am I right, by the notoriously irascible Sumner Redstone. And Tom, that is when you kind of began your career path with Bono and Oprah Winfrey, but tell us about connecting with Bono.
Well, I got fired, which really blew me back on my heels. And the next morning, the first person to call me, really calling me from Ireland, was Bono, who was we'd known each other for 20 some odd years. MTV and U2 kind of came up together. But he called me up, he said, "Fuck Sumner Redstone." Those were his exact words. He says, "This is the best thing that's ever happened to you. Now I have a great opportunity for you. I want you to run Red. I just started this thing called Red. We're gonna partner with companies and generate money for HIV AIDS in Africa." I mean, I hadn't even really heard of it at that point. But then he has the phone later that day. Steve Jobs is calling me, Bill Gates is calling me. Bono's this incredible networker. It ended up with me agreeing not to run Red, but I said I would help him reorganize his whole social impact world. He had One, he had Red, he had another thing called Data. And that was in 2007. And in the process of that, I got fascinated because I had to meet all these people who worked there, who were young activists, who I really never met before. So I got really engaged. I made some recommendations about a new CEO for One and putting these organizations together. And I've been the board chair ever since for over 12 years now.
So tell us what One does.
Well, One's a global advocacy movement. And, our goal is, to campaign to end extreme poverty. As you said, Bono would call us the NRA for this extreme poor. He said, almost everything, shoe manufacturers, aluminum makers, everybody has an advocacy organization, but poor people don't. So that was sort of a white space and we were gonna fill it. And we got people like, Bill Gates and Michael Bloomberg and Warren Buffett and George Soros and John Doerr and Jeff Skoll and all these amazing people to help fund us in these years. It's been really, quite a wonderful thing. But it's not a charity. It's about justice and equality. Just because where you were born shouldn't, determine if you live or you die. And we really depend on raising people's voices. So we lobby political leaders on the inside and we run cutting edge campaigns on the outside to put pressure on these leaders. Very consciously bipartisan, that's the way you get things done. And our focus has primarily been on Africa, and we have an increasing organization on the ground there, but we're looking to, empower citizens to hold governments to account.
So this goal, this audacious goal to end extreme poverty by 2030, where are you on that track, and how does the COVID-19 pandemic impact your progress?
Well, I got some bad news, but if you take a step back, the progress in reducing extreme poverty has been amazing. Millions of lives have been saved, maternal mortality is reduced, more kids are in school, countries that had broken economies are now witnessing record levels of growth. And since 1990 to 2010, global poverty was cut in half, and that's continued. But COVID has come along, and it has been a massive shock to both the public's health, but all in these poorer countries, but also to their economies. You know, just like we've seen in Europe and the States, countries in Africa have been hammered. Joblessness is up, hunger levels are up, businesses are collapsing. The tourist sector alone has just ground to a total halt. Remittances, which were a large source of income, are way down, commodities. So there's one bad thing after another, but it means that billions of dollars has been lost. So we're now witnessing the first increase in global poverty in over 20 years, rolling back, you know, huge gains. And, you know, we've kind of pivoted our organization to deal with that head on.
So give us an example of something that one is doing now in light of the pandemic, a big audacious program.
Well, we basically went all COVID all the time and we took everything off the plate. We had a full plate, but within 10 days of the lockdown, we launched a campaign called One World to call for a global response to this pandemic. And we're focusing on three things. One is countering the massive negative impact of the pandemic on poor countries by calling for a suspension of debt service through 2021. Now the G20 has agreed to do this through the end of this year, but we want to get one more year. But multilateral and private creditors have yet to agree to this at all. And just consider the fact that Nigeria now spends 99% of its available budget on debt repayments, leaving very little money for anything else. The second thing is making sure that the vaccines, when they come through, are available to everyone everywhere. That's something we call vaccine equity. And it's not just about what's fair, although that alone should help persuade people. It's also smart from an epidemiological point of view. You know, you want to surround and encircle this virus that crosses borders without any passport. So you've got to deploy vaccines systematically with a plan that has the best chance of shortening the lifespan of the pandemic. Healthcare and essential workers first, vulnerable groups second, and so on. There's this coalition of the willing. Countries, big foundations like Gates, multilateral institutions that are responsible for global health, like Gavi and the Global Fund. They've created a vehicle and a process for this vaccine equity thing, but too many countries are not engaged. And the United States has announced that it won't be, which is a mistake, because as we say, and it's a pretty good line, none of us are safe until all of us are safe. The third thing we want to do, I'll be quick, we just want to think about how to build back better, but not just build back better, but build back different, because this pandemic has uncovered that a lot of our institutions are weak. There's glaring inequalities in countries and between countries. So when we put things back, what needs to be different? And we're developing policy to work on all of these issues.
So Tom, if you could go to Washington, D.C. and work your magic and change anything in terms of the way Washington works, what would you do?
Well, if I had that great power, I'd have a few things to say. One, make them pick their own battles. It's one thing, to disagree or stall the odd bill, but to debate for months and months with no conclusion is just so harmful to the country. Why let legislation sit without action or use the Capitol building just as a place for political sport? That's inexcusable. Now, I have my own views about who's more right or wrong and what needs to change, and I will vote on that. But leaving that aside, the fact is that neither the executive or the legislative branch of our government has handled this pandemic appropriately. Neither one has ensured our safety or our security. The Congress hasn't fought as a body for the good science that is our best ally in this fight. It's fighting instead about whether science is really fact or opinion. A third thing is, I would say, we used to have a bipartisan consensus on most national security issues, and we don't have that anymore. And I think because of that, we're less safe. I tell them too that these deals for COVID that we want to have done should be done faster, and we need to put billions of dollars in that legislation for the international response, which I already talked about what the issues are there in these poorer countries. Lastly, I just say, we didn't elect you just to run again. We elected you to lead, so help yourself and do some leading.
Good. Hopefully they'll watch this and they'll hear this. Tom, what would you like to tell? So this is our target audience here is emerging leaders who want to go out there and make an impact on the world, a positive impact. You've done that. You've done that in a very unconventional way by being an entrepreneur, then being a Fortune 500 CEO, and then by working in the nonprofit world at a very high level. How do you do that? How do young people do a path that has been as rewarding as yours has been for you? I think you love what you do, and as rewarding as it has been for the world.
Well, I would say, you know, you want to, there's no shortage of things to do, but you've got to determine what best turns you on and who could use your help. I mean, for starters, just scan the UN Sustainable Development Goals. There's plenty there. You find something you like, climate change, whatever, learn everything you can about that issue. And if possible, I always recommend this, if you haven't traveled, drop out and go travel. Fill up your passport. I don't mean, you know, just going to London or Paris, but get off the beaten track to Africa and Asia. Travel is probably the best and cheapest graduate school you can buy. I learned more traveling than I ever did in school, and I know now this is hard to do because of COVID. We can't go anywhere. That's why we're here remotely. But one day, you know, to quote President Trump, this pandemic is going to go away, and that's true. That's a true thing.
That is a true thing.
Employers, whoever they're going to be, are going to respect a line like that on your resume, and you'll stand out more. But I would just say that it gave me great self-confidence and perspective, and that stays with me. But this is also, this age now is sort of the age of social purpose, and it's increasingly true with, you know, the millennials and the Gen Z people who are out there. I know that's a lot of you who are out there now listening to this, but there's a plethora of organizations, and that list is growing all the time, that can use your energy and use your knowledge. You know, there's foundations, advocacy organizations like the One Campaign, or think tanks, any number of NGOs, or even a journalism career. You might even want to be a politician or be on someone's, you know, political staff. So that would be some basic advice I could offer.
That's great, Tom. Don't you wish you were 25?
Boy, do I ever. I do. I sort of felt I was sort of born, I sort of had born with golden age, but you know, this is a very exciting time to be. And if you're excited about activism or factivism, this is a great time because, you know, your peers and, you know, there's just so much change has to be made. And I think there's a lot of, so many people willing to chip in and fix it. Very interesting times.
Yeah. Well, Tom, thank you very much. You are a role model. Thanks for sharing your insights, your story, and keep on doing what you're doing. Well, great to talk to you, Pattie, and happy birthday. It's 50 years old. It's sort of the baby boomer age of a presidential organization. Thanks. Great to see you. Bye-bye. Great, Tom. Bye-bye.